Hi, this is Jay Hummel. Welcome to the deep dive in collaboration with Investopedia. We try to pick different topics and we talk a lot about investments. We talk a lot about wealth management. We talk a lot about mergers and acquisitions, but we don't talk enough about entrepreneurship, given that most of our viewers are business owners. And how do they think about work-life balance? How do they think about how they want to live their lives and the way they invest in their businesses? And I'm so excited to have a good friend of mine, Steven Miyao, on today, who's a very successful entrepreneur, and now he's an executive coach. And I just thought he could bring a lot of insights to the viewers based on something that we haven't done before. So Steven, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show today.
Jay, thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Well, give the viewers a little bit about your background. It's really interesting. So just give them a brief background on your history and then what you're up to today.
Yeah. So as you said, I've been an entrepreneur most of my life. I started my first company at 27, which was Kasina, which I ran for many, many years. Initially, we were a management consulting firm, primarily for wealth and asset management companies on their strategies, product, distribution, marketing, etc. And then in 07, 08, when most of us probably can still remember when the crash happened, I almost lost my business because all the asset managers were down 40-60% and nobody was hiring consultants. And then we pivoted, and I built a data business that we then sold to a publicly traded company, DST, where I then ran multiple divisions. After that, I took a little time and said, I think my corporate gig time is over and I need to do something different. And I started coaching, but at the same time, also I continued to advise various startups. And I always got pulled back into running these startups. And I've been doing that pretty successful. Some not so successful. This is how the game works. But with some nice exits in the meantime. And recently I decided no longer startups, and I'm just going to purely focus on my coaching and still advising startups, but no longer being an operator. And yeah, that's been my career so far.
Yeah, so far you're not done yet.
No,
So
I'm not done yet.
as you think of your journey as it relates to Kasina, starting in at 27, just kind of just walk the viewers through some of the learnings you've had during that journey, right? I'm sure you pivoted the business a number of times. I'm sure there were ups and downs. But as you look backwards, because it's always fun to look backwards after you've been successful in something, it always looks more fun than it was. What are some of the learnings you have during that Kasina run?
There's so many. I think it was, for me, really my business school, and I'd learned by trial and error, and many things I've learned the hard way because you're not as smart as you think you are. But I think that the most important lesson, and I think that that's also applicable for a lot of advisor businesses, is that you have to be very clear of what your objective is. What do you want your exit strategy to be, or why are you doing what you're doing? And so the answer might be, this is a lifestyle business. I'm living the life that I want to live. I can go surfing in the morning and meet with a bunch of clients, and they're happy, and I can do this for the rest of my life. Great. Most of the time when you're in an entrepreneurial journey, it's not like that. You're working really hard and you have to hustle all the time, and there's quite a bit of stress involved in it. So in 2007, I had this epiphany. I was like, I'm going to go bankrupt, which luckily I didn't, but it was very close. And I'm not going to be able to get a job again, or at least in that time, because all I knew was financial services, and they were laying people off. And so I
was
decided
going to say it would not be a good time to go bankrupt and find a financial services job.
And I had a young kid at the time, and So I decided that I was going to change the business and have to take off some money off the table and create a business that is sellable. And that's why the pivot to becoming a data company. And so for advisors that are thinking about this, you do have to think about what is your long-term strategy. How do you want to be able to monetize what you're doing? And then once I knew what I had to do, then very specifically, I built the company around what I thought that other companies were not able to do and wanted to integrate and buy. And then I actually specifically figured out what companies would be potential buyers. And then I built strategic relationships with those so that we can test it out and then that they could see the value. And then actually they came to me and said, I think an acquisition would be something that would work for both of us. And so you have to be very strategic. I think that's it took me way too long to figure that out. I needed essentially a financial meltdown to get to the conclusion that I had to take off some money off the table and that the status quo no longer worked for me.
Well, and you just reverse engineered it, right? You kind of thought in what you and I have talked about in the past, which is still so funny that we read Stephen Covey together back in the day, think with the end in mind, and everyone's like, well, that's so simple. But it's not as easy when you're in the seat trying to do it. It's like, well, maybe I should engineer my business to look like something that the end inquirer might want to buy, right? And it seems so obvious at the time, in hindsight, but it's not as easy when you're sitting in the seat.
Absolutely.
So when most of our viewers are financial advisors, right? Wealth management, as you know, advisors, mostly RIA owners, home office executives. How do you take what you've learned on your entrepreneurial journey? How do you think about exit? Because as you know, today, the RIA space, is specifically in the wealth management space, is as hot as probably any sector in financial services. How would you advise the viewers of this to take what you learned in your entrepreneurial journey to what they may be dealing with on a day-to-day basis?
I think most entrepreneurs wait too long to sell their company, and they overvalue the company in their mind, and they think that the longer they stay around, the more value there'll be, or the bigger the exit will be. And that's not always the case. So I think actually the longer you wait, the more risk you're taking on. And so when you have an opportunity to sell your business, look at that number and don't think about, oh, I could get double if I wait a certain amount. Look at the amount that you're getting and then say to yourself, is this going to change my life? Is this going to be a significant event for me? And if the answer is yes, it doesn't matter how much money you're getting. If you could, get a few more $1 million, from it, or whatever that might be, or even, I've advised companies where they were valued at over $100 million and they thought that they could get to $1 billion, and they never did. And then the pandemic hit, and then they, went bankrupt, and they got nothing.
And then they sold for 20.
Yeah,
We've all
exactly.
seen that, right?
Yeah. So I think that's an important lesson. If you have an offer that is decent, I think it's worthwhile taking it. Of course, every situation is different, but in general, I think that's something that I definitely learned from my journey.
So, and I'll pivot a little bit here on kind of our last topic is, you're doing a lot of coaching, right? Executive coaching, spending a lot of time with RA owners, executives, tech owners, kind of across the spectrum. I guess what are the one or two things that you're coaching these executives on today?
I think the most important thing is this: most people pick a career and then they try to fit their life around it, meaning their spouse, their children, their friends, their faith, their whatever it might be, right? Their exercise, their health, all of these things. And I don't really have time to exercise, I'm too busy, or I don't really have time for my friends because I'm too busy. And it should really be the other way around. You should try to figure out what you want your life to be, and then try to find a career that enables you to live that life. And I've tried to do that, at least in the last 5 years. And now that I'm full-time in coaching, I definitely can do that much more because it's my time, and I choose to spend the time the way I want to. But that is, I think, the most important aspect. The other part we talked about too a little bit is that most people also don't live a very deliberate life. So they don't actually think about, what do I want the outcome to be, and then putting a plan together to execute on that. So if your plan is to sell the business at some point, think about how to sell the business and what do you need to do, and then be myopic about that and don't try to do all these things. And I think, they're all related, of course. The third one is that if you don't plan your time, or you don't decide to how you use your time, somebody else will. And so a lot of people are always busy, and they can never get done all the things that they want to get done. But it's also, when we look at what they do, is that they fill their calendar from morning to night on things, and they think that they're going to get an award or whatever for all, hitting all the meetings, right? Nobody rewards you for hitting all the meetings. You get rewarded on hitting your KPIs, either because you set your KPIs for yourself and your organization, or because you work for somebody and they have a KPI for you. It's so those, I think, are three key things. Of course, there are so many things of optimizing what we do. And I'm not in a position where I don't struggle with the same things everyone else is.
Well, you and I joked last week when we were connecting, and I always say those things are so logical, and it's so easy to coach other people, but it is so hard to take your own advice, because the things you just talked about, as you and I talked about last week, I know those things. I know that's exactly what you should do, but I'm bad at it. And I'm lucky to mentor a lot of younger people in their career, and I would say the same thing to them. And every time I get out of a coaching session, I think to myself, man, I'm not as good at it as I'm telling these kids to be. And so it's easy in concept, but it's hard to execute. Oh.
Yeah, one thing, and there's a term for it, but I don't remember the term. But one person told me a long time ago is that you should always have three kinds of relationships in your life. One is to have a mentor, or hopefully multiple mentors, to have peers that you are able to spar with, and then that you have a mentee or mentees that you are able to teach. And that then enables you to really solidify your knowledge or get better at what you do. And anyone that played sports, that makes a lot of sense, right? So I used to be a tennis player, and you play with people that are better than you, and you rise to the occasion and you get better. And then you play people that are the same. And then of course it's also so good to have somebody that doesn't play as well, and then you teach them how to do it, and then it solidifies those things that that you should be doing.
Well, Steven, this has been awesome, man. And as I always tell people, one of my favorite parts about this podcast is it reconnects me with people who come on the show. And you and I hadn't connected in probably 5 years. And I'm so excited about what you're doing. And you continue to make a huge impact on people in the industry, as you always have. So I can't thank you enough for coming on the show.
Jay, it was a pleasure. I appreciate it.
And Steven, how do people find you? Obviously, I think there's a lot of people who should connect, that watch the show, who could benefit from your coaching and your insights. How should viewers reach out to you?
Yeah, thank you. The easiest probably is on LinkedIn, right? Steven Miyao, Miyao. And then of course my website, coachingmetta.com. Also check out, if I may do a do a plug on my podcast.
Oh, of
Check out
course.
my podcast. You can find it on Spotify or YouTube. It's called Midlife Remix. So yeah, these are all various places where you can find me, and I'm excited to engage with all of you.
Well, I would encourage the viewers to reach out to Steven. He's one of the coolest, most successful entrepreneurs, down to earth people I've met. I think connecting with him would be life changing for you, and I hope you do it. And we look forward to seeing you next time on the Deep Dive.